My name is Nicole Cribbs. I am a Chief Environmental Scientist at Fowler Davis & Associates, a civil engineering firm in Tampa, Florida, the United States. I have 27 years experience in environmental consulting on Florida Department of Transportation projects in Central and South Florida. It's my pleasure to present on hotspots mapping, which creates a visual tool that can be used by transportation planners to identify and prioritize road segments in which Panther-Vehicle collisions occur. The target species of hotspots mapping is the Florida Panther, which is a subspecies of the mountain lion. The Florida Panther is a federally listed endangered species and has been listed since 1967. The current population is broadly estimated to be between 120 and 230 adult and subadult individuals. In Florida, the federal agency, the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, works cooperatively with the state agency, the Florida Fish and Wildlife Conservation Commission, on recovery goals and research. Public and private stakeholders also play a large role. The map on the left outlines the historic ranges of the mountain lion, limited to the western United States, and the range of the Florida panther in the southeast. Historically, the Florida panther's range, shown in the purple outline, included Louisiana, Alabama, and Georgia, as well as Florida. The map on the right is a closer view of the state of Florida, including point data for known occurrences of the Florida panther, which are restricted to South Florida. The red line represents the Caloosahatchee River, which is the current delineation for the known breeding population, which occurs entirely south of the river. As Florida is surrounded on three sides by water, the panthers have no alternatives to expand their breeding territory except to move back north across the river. Development pressure is a primary reason for the diminishing range. The entire breeding population is crammed into the tip of South Florida in an area that is about 5% the size of their historic range. Research and management in Florida is a cooperative effort among several agencies and entities. This is a list of types of data that are collected to help track the status, population, and recovery efforts. For the hotspots mapping, our primary data source is the list of panther deaths that is updated throughout the year by FWC. The list is usually in an Excel file or similar type format that is vetted to pick out only deaths that are the result of Panther-Vehicle collisions, which I'll refer to as PVCs for most of this presentation. The list includes reasons for death, which can include natural causes for interspecies aggression, for example, but the leading cause of death for the Florida panther is related to vehicle collisions. Last year, out of 22 deaths, 19 were due to vehicle collisions with panthers colliding with cars. And while that is a sadly high proportion, it's a rather typical proportion for deaths due to vehicle collisions, looking at the data that has been kept since 1972. It's an often quoted statistic that about 1,000 people per day move to Florida, but far, far less leave. At that rate, about 330,000 people move here each year, equal to adding a city about the size of Orlando each year. The U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's goal to delist the panther resulted in the development of a Panther Recovery Implementation Team with the acronym PRIT, mandated to facilitate activities most needed to progress towards recovery goals. The PRIT developed a sub-team shortly after specifically to identify transportation-related projects that could impact panthers and habitat. The mission of the PRIT Transportation Subteam was to identify and prioritize high PVC areas and recommend risk reduction measures. The group developed a method to identify road segments that pose a risk to panthers and a system to track overlapping transportation projects. The first hotspots map was developed in 2016, is updated annually, and made available in both KMZ and shapefile formats for use. Transportation projects that overlap with identified hotspot segments are identified. Project-specific risk reduction measures, project status, and funding options are tracked in an accompanying report. Hotspots are removed from the map when no further remedial action is warranted, such as after the addition of wildlife shelves under bridges or the addition of wildlife fencing. The initial focus of the hotspots map was South Florida, given that the breeding population must be protected. The map on the right depicts the point data that was developed from the annual list of vehicle deaths I mentioned a few minutes ago. Getting the PVC locations on the map was the first step to identifying high-risk road segments. And after some GIS magic, the hotspots map starts to take shape. In this very zoomed out view, you can pick out the small color-coded segments that represent roadways where PVCs have been recorded, and the color-coded symbology allows a visual interpretation on both a regional and small-scale view of both risk and potential mitigation. In a regional view, other mapping resources can be overlaid to help planners identify potential wildlife pathways and plan wildlife crossings in new projects. Higher success is achieved when agencies and stakeholders are involved early in the project planning and development to vet funding and construction options. Very briefly, the GIS workflow begins with roadway centerline shapefiles. A 200-meter buffer is placed around the road centerlines. Secondly, a shapefile of PVC point data is developed from the agency database of annual deaths. A 500-meter buffer is applied to the PVC data points, and the buffered roads are clipped and joined with the buffered PVC data. The resulting shapefile contains short segments of roadways with individual PVCs when points are beyond 500 meters of another point, or overlapping segments when PVCs occur within 500 meters of each other. Overlapping PVCs are joined together, resulting in a longer segment. The middle panel shows purple segments, which in this example are hotspots from past data, and the green segments depict the current year's update. The current year's data is merged with the existing data, and the hotspot layer starts to take shape. A count field is added to the merged segment file and symbology is applied. The initial creation of the map in 2016 used PVCs from 1972 through 2016, and since then updates involve reviewing the agency data to pull out the current year's PVC data to add it to the existing hotspots. Color symbology is then applied to the count field to indicate a range resulting in 4 categories, representing 1 to 2 collisions in blue, 3 to 5 in green, 6 to 8 orange, and 10 to 12 red. Changes in segments are summarized with each annual update with a focus on segments having increases in severity or length. Segments are manually removed from the hotspot map once project-specific risk reduction measures have been implemented. The final outcome of the map includes an ArcGIS layer that looks like this example, a Google Earth KMZ file, and an accompanying point data shapefile of the cumulative PVC locations. The map is available to transportation planners who normally are not ecologists. This visual tool provides users with a regional and localized view of high-risk areas. Separate from the map, transportation plans are developed for state and local levels. These plans are monitored by the PRIT Transportation Subteam, and hotspots are compared and matched to future transportation projects. By matching projects early, there's a higher level of success in creating partnerships to address construction challenges, sources of funding, and to conduct pre-project assessments to identify the most effective type of improvements to reduce the hotspot risk. Hotspots and matching projects are tracked and updated periodically. Mapping PVCs demonstrated that the Florida Panther's habitat is so confined that even urbanized areas are being traversed and collisions are occurring in highly residential areas. While there are significant challenges to building wildlife crossings in residential areas, other risk reduction measures can be implemented, such as signs for driver education, speed zone enforcement, and public outreach. The Hotspots Map and Transportation Project Tracking List was developed as a mandate from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service's Panther Recovery Implementation Team. The mandate charged transportation planners to assist in activities most needed to progress towards recovery goals for the Florida Panther. The Transportation Subteam achieved the goal of developing a tool that identifies and prioritizes high Panther-Vehicle collision areas. By making this tool available to other stakeholders, risk reduction measures are planned in future transportation projects for specific hotspots. Recent improvements implemented on transportation projects have resulted in the successful removal of hotspots from the regional map. Tall wildlife fencing along an interstate through the Florida Everglades acts to channel wildlife to designated underpasses for safe crossing of the 4-lane road. Camera data is capturing panthers and a long list of other wildlife routinely using new crossings incorporated into designs for roads in panther habitat. Other presenters in this session will talk about the location and design analysis that goes into developing a specific type of risk reduction measure. One example is wildlife shelves added to new bridge construction like the photo on the left. Other work being done involves modeling potential routes used by wildlife to predict movement, which is helpful in putting the right crossing in the right place. Designing risk reduction measures into transportation projects must be done with regional intentionality. The planning needs to be early in the process to get inclusion in projects, cooperation with other stakeholders, and in many cases, funding or permitting squared away. Using the hotspots map and target project list, future transportation projects in Florida will continue to match up risk sites with proposed projects with the goal of achieving more panther success stories and ensuring future generations of panthers.